MESA table, which sits on the lunar surface in front of the lunar module. At the bottom, that rectangular bag is called the equipment transfer bag, and that is the thing we are going to be paying attention to in this clip. Now, on the right, you'll see the other astronaut, and he's moving away from the ship, and he's fooling around with the UV camera. The astronaut in front of you is about to turn and go back towards the MESA table and the equipment transfer bag, and when he does, on the right, you'll see the equipment transfer bag swinging. It's just swinging back and forth, and it's going at about the same pace. It shows no sign of the momentum slowing down. It's just going back and forth as if some sort of vent is blowing on it. But there's nothing that can be blowing on it if that's the moon. Because on the moon there is no atmosphere, there's no wind, there's no air, there's no breeze that can be blowing that. This clip is from the closeout of EVA-1, Apollo 16, and the next clip is from the closeout of EVA-3, also Apollo 16. And we're going to see the same phenomenon with the equipment transfer bag. As soon as astronaut Charlie Duke attaches it to the MESA table, it starts swinging on its own again, as if it was being installed right over a vent. But then it gets really interesting because I think they notice it and they discuss it and then take corrective actions.
Hey, John? Yeah? Take a look. No.
Okay, Charlie, you should have... Charlie, you should have 7 Hasselblads and 3...
Now you're going to see Charlie Duke take corrective action. He's going to walk over to the swinging ETB bag. He's going to remove the camera that's attached to his chest. He's going to put it on top of the MESA table, and then he's going to put his camera in the ETB bag, and then he's going to remove the bag from the straps, and he's going to place it on top of the MESA table so it's no longer swinging from the straps. And there's obviously a voice we can't hear organizing the charade-like diversion you are about to see.
Where's the bag that the good old UV? Hey, Charlie, did you throw my camera away? No, I didn't throw your camera away. Where is it? Over there? Yeah. Okay. The bag that the what?
The bag that the what? He's obviously hearing a voice we can't hear who's telling him what to do. This is just a really strange scene. Now watch as he walks away. You'll see he no longer has the camera. You can't have any wind or breeze or ventilation on the moon. But this thing is like a perpetual motion machine. And this is how they corrected that motion, by taking it off the straps and putting it on top of the table.
You see, the vibration of my voice box makes the air vibrate between us. Then when the air vibrates your eardrum, you hear what I'm saying. But maybe you've seen a demonstration of a bell under a glass jar? With normal air inside the jar, you could hear the bell clearly. But when the vacuum pump drew the air out of the jar, there was nothing inside to carry the vibrations of the bell. Nothing until the air was let back into the jar.
They can't together your photo numbers. And this is clear tube number 2. Okay, I can almost drive it without a hammer. But if you'll hand it to me, I'll get it just a second. I'm going to take a couple more shots of this before we leave. Get all in, I get the pictures. All right? Try it in real easy, Houston.
The sounds in space, it's odd to have a hammer or a metal tool and bang it against something and hear absolutely nothing. You can, sound won't travel in a vacuum. So there you are outside, and you could be hitting something, no sound at all.
In space, since there's no atmosphere, there's no air, if you bang on something while you're doing your spacewalk, you will not be able to hear that.
And this leads us to the dilemma of our final segment. All modern astronauts, such as Piers Sellers and Mike Massimino, claim to hear absolutely nothing when they're out on the International Space Station in the vacuum, banging away with metal tools and objects, whereas during the Apollo missions, all kinds of sounds have been recorded that should not be possible if they are on the moon in the vacuum of space.
Okay, just the fact you're almost driving without a hammer. But if you'll hand it to me, I'll get it in a second. I'm going to take a couple more shots of this before we leave. Get it all in, I get the pictures. All right? Driving in real easy, Houston.
That does not sound like the spacesuit acting like a drum at all. It sounds like a metal hammer striking a metal object repeatedly with authority. Pictured is Alan Bean during Apollo 12 striking a metal core tube into the so-called lunar surface with a metal hammer. This is an interview with Apollo astronauts Alan Bean and Pete Conrad done by the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. They are once again taking the position that the sound is coming through the hand and transmitting into the microphones in the helmet. Alan Bean says, "I would have said it wasn't possible," and Pete Conrad responds, "The other guy can't hear it." If the sound is coming through Alan Bean's microphone, then like his voice, it must be transmitted directly into the headset of Pete Conrad, so his statement makes no sense. Alan Bean's statement makes a lot of sense, since it would not have been possible in a vacuum. When Bean says, "I would have said it wasn't possible," he has science on his side. And he also has NASA on his side, at least up until August 19th, 2011. And this brings us to the most important graphic in the film. This is a web page that has been disappeared from the internet by NASA as of August 2011. However, this page, which was created for children, you can see the banner at the top, Lunar Science for Kids. This page directly contradicts the assertions made in the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal concerning the hammering sounds in Apollo 12, 15, and 17. This page talks about the science involved with sound on the moon, and it does so correctly. And that is why NASA has disappeared it from the web. The contradiction between the journal and this page was brought up in the very popular Moon Zoo forum. And that is where I first became aware of the situation. Reader Tom128 pointed out the contradiction between the site for children and the journal. And I went looking for the site for children and could not find it. I then went to my favorite research tool, the Wayback Machine at archive.org, and I was able to find an old version of the page that NASA did not clean up. And whenever I see information go missing from the web, it always starts me thinking, and this was the genesis of the film. At that moment, I became a NASA moon hoax researcher. You've seen the image on the right of the graphic before. That is Alan Bean hammering a core tube during Apollo 12, and this is the sound of such hammering. The graphic is problematic for NASA because of the contradiction to the journal, and the graphic is correct science. And I quote, "Sound needs something to travel through to get from one place to another. On the moon, since there is no air, sound cannot travel above the surface. So, there are no sounds on the surface of the moon. When the Apollo astronauts were out on the moon's surface, they could only talk to each other and to mission control by using the radios in their air-filled helmets. Even when the astronaut in the photo to the right hit a metal tube into the ground with a hammer, no sound was made." All of the sounds so far analyzed were made by the astronauts as they were handling tools, but now we are going to analyze some sounds that are made a distance away from the astronauts. So what you just saw appears to be a smoking gun. That scene, which was broadcast live to the world during Apollo 15, shows astronaut James Irwin. He takes this cord or band off of a canister, and those canisters are in the mesa table, which Irwin is standing in front of. He unravels the cord, which has two metallic locks at the end of it, pictured here. They look like bullets. He takes that off, he unravels it, he reaches back with his right hand, and he throws the cord away. Let's take another look at it. So the argument has been made for the hammering that the sound is coming through the glove and it's miraculously getting into the microphones. But we don't have to deal with that argument because James Irwin releases the object and it hits the ship and he's not touching it, and that sound is picked up by the microphone inside the astronaut's helmet. And you can always tell that that's the microphone in play because you will always hear the sound of the suit air supply system in the background whenever the astronaut is transmitting, and you will hear this sound remain on for a split second after the astronaut stops transmitting.
Yeah, you better believe it. Yeah, you better believe it.
Both the outside of the ship and the inside of the ship in the cabin are in the vacuum because the lunar module does not have an air hatch. So when the astronauts leave the lunar module, it is depressurized. Microphones in the lunar module plug into the audio centers. The only voice possibilities are through the use of the headsets. They took off with 6 microphones, 3 Snoopy caps. Each astronaut also had a lightweight headset at launch. While they were on the moon and the suspect audio event took place, they were wearing their Snoopy caps. Communication cables, which are the umbilical cords that the astronauts plugged into while in the lunar module, as you can see from the checklist, were stowed prior to EVA. Also, looking at the same exact checklist, we can see that the lightweight headsets were also stowed prior to EVA. So, there were no live microphones inside the cabin.
Even the one image that is claimed to be an actual photograph of Earth from space is called into question, simply because of a film that was released accidentally by NASA of Apollo 11 faking the very first picture of Earth from space. So let's have a look at that video.
Of all the footage of Apollo 11 requested from NASA over a 5-year period, one gem was discovered just before the completion of this documentary. An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason prior to the mission, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Furthermore, it is apparent they are in genuine zero gravity aboard the actual spacecraft, necessary to convince the mass media of their authenticity, just not any further than Earth orbit, as you will see. In this never-before-seen or heard footage, not only is the radio conversation between the astronauts and Houston Control audible, there is a secondary, private conversation taking place between the crew and a third confidential party, prompting the astronauts with what to say, when to speak, and how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired misleading effect. NASA claims that the Houston transmissions were the only ones taking place with the astronauts. Listen now as Houston Control initiates a conversation with the crew, only to find them too preoccupied with the behind-the-scenes trickery to respond. Moments pass and the oversight is picked up on by the clandestine third party, who quickly prompts them with talk. Immediately, Neil Armstrong speaks.
Oh, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger, we're ramping in on Earth.
Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance to demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private. Until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows, as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from entering through the other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom. This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
And we only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
Blue gas, city white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth.
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away? Furthermore, if they genuinely went to the moon, why would they be faking any part of it? Why this trickery with the window? By faking being halfway to the moon, it becomes apparent that they did so because they could not even go halfway. It thus confirms that the stumbling block to their success was the lethal radiation of the Van Allen radiation belts. Since the same equipment was used on the subsequent missions in the 40 months that followed, none of them could have gone to the moon. They only increased their proficiency at staging them.
So apparently the moon is 238,000 miles away. But if you just put that aside for a second and just look at the moon, perhaps you'll notice this. In this example, only the clouds close to the moon are lit up, not the clouds further away. That indicates that the moon is much, much closer than we've been told. Because if the moon were 238,000 miles away, then all the clouds should be illuminated, not just the ones closest to it. And here's an example of a schoolboy mistake. This is a famous picture from Apollo 8, which is entitled Earthrise. It was taken from above the moon's surface, looking back at the Earth. The only problem is, the Earth appears the same size as the moon appears from the Earth. But the Earth is 4 times the size of the moon. So it should have looked like this. Somebody screwed up. Now, there will be some people who still think we went to the moon. I can't believe that there are still people who think that 1969 technology went over 400,000 miles, managed to navigate to the moon using computers that were orders of magnitude less powerful than the first iPhone, passing through the immensely hazardous Van Allen radiation belts, which, by the way, NASA cannot figure out how to get through today, somehow landed on the moon, spent a delightful few days planting flags, playing golf, riding around on dune buggies, and then took off, or rather levitated off the lunar surface, only briefly nipping back to pick up the person operating the camera, and returned safely. And not just once, but 7 times. It's a fantasy. The whole thing is a fantasy. Everything you saw supposedly on the moon was in a soundstage using Stanley Kubrick's perfected front projection technology. And I'm not going to spend much time. There's plenty of evidence to show that it was completely faked. It was complete fantasy. So here's a conspiracy theory. If I was on the receiving end of upwards of 200 billion of taxpayers' money, perhaps this is what I would do. Well, I'd spend a few million on some of what they call hero models. Space shuttle mock-ups that look the part, have lots of flashing lights and computer screens and stuff, but are not flyable. They'll end up collecting dust in museums anyway. Then I would have a few mock-ups that I would fly into space, but really would basically fly out of sight and ditch in the sea, getting destroyed in the process. Then I would spend a few million, perhaps even $1 billion, let's give the taxpayers their money's worth. Perhaps I'll spend $1 billion or so on developing a plane that looks like the space shuttle. There you go, job done. No refunds. So let's change the launch profile of the space shuttle for my new classified one. We have a remote controlled, full-size mock-up, basically nothing inside, just an empty shell. That's flown up on remote control, on essentially a big firework. Everything acts as normal, the booster rockets detach as normal, but when we get to the external tank separation, that doesn't actually happen. What actually happens is the tank and the shuttle fall back to Earth, where they ditch in the sea and get destroyed in the process. After the mission's complete, a space shuttle plane takes off from an undisclosed location and lands at an Air Force base in front of the TV cameras. Simple. Don't be ridiculous, Dave. You couldn't fake something like that. There'll be too many people involved, and the truth is bound to get out. Lam 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 lam. The best example of space shuttle fakery is the Challenger disaster. In 1986, the shuttle Challenger exploded about 74 seconds after takeoff, killing all 7 astronauts inside. Or did it? It turns out that 6 of the 7 are still alive and kicking today. Ellison Onizuka claims to be his identical twin brother, Claude. Yeah, I've got an identical twin brother, Claude, too. The Challenger pilot, Mickey Smith, hasn't even bothered changing his name. He's now Professor Michael J. Smith of University of Wisconsin. Now, Krista McAuliffe was a bit of a sneaky one. She was the Challenger payload specialist, quite famous for being a teacher. It turns out during her astronaut days she was using her middle name, Krista, and now she goes by her first name, Sharon, and she's a Syracuse law professor. The Challenger commander, Francis Richard Scobie, is now Dick Scobie, which sounds like a rather unpleasant disease, CEO of Cows in Trees Limited. Judith Resnick, the Challenger mission specialist, again hasn't even bothered changing her name. She's a professor at Yale Law. And finally, Ronald McNair, another Challenger mission specialist, claims to be his identical twin brother, Carl McNair. What are the odds?